Hello and welcome to this episode of the Transection podcast. This week I interviewed Mark Silver. He's the founder of Heart of Business Incorporated. Since 2001, he's been pioneering and integrating spirituality in business in a way that is effective and nourishing. He's helped thousands of spiritually orientated, heart-centered entrepreneurs feel really good while finding plenty of their best clients and making more money. Mark is also a very interesting person because I think it was in the 90s, he said, he was big on the activism scene, like going to marches and all that sort of thing and getting involved in lots of things, including being part of a magazine, like a really big national magazine in the US, that is. And he was even on Oprah, which I asked him about. That was early 90s. It's not the experience that we hoped that it would be. Being bisexual in the early 90s was not as accepted as it was today, and even today it's still a bit of a shit show. Anyway, so he was big on that, and he's also a Sufi Muslim. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's sort of like, and I'm about to butcher this horribly, so I apologise in advance, but Sufi Islam is more sort of like the philosophical, spiritual, poetic side of things. I mean, you find a lot of that within Islam anyway, but this is like a particular brand, and we talk a little bit about that as well. And it's really lovely. I massively enjoyed speaking to Mark. He's such a lovely bloke, and he made me cry twice. No, I made him cry twice, and he made me cry once at the end, in a nice way. So you are warned. So anyway, enjoy. And if you've not signed up to the mailing list, you can do so at mooksharrishill.com/transection. I had to put my teeth back in then. There's a little green box. You just put your name and your email in there, and then we just send you an email every time we release an episode, and then occasionally we might send you one extra in a week, but it's never more than 2 a week, so we won't send you too many. You can also find us on Instagram at Transection Podcast, on Twitter at TransectionP, and Facebook under the Transection Podcast. In fact, why don't you tweet us? But yeah, we can see from our analytics that a lot of our fans are listening in lots of different countries. We've got a few in Brazil, United States, Canada, UK, and a few different other places as well. So why don't you tweet us or send us a message and just let us know where you, the listeners, are living, and where you're listening from, and how far are we reaching? Because I know there's quite a few countries on that analytics list, and it's fascinating. I love it. Anyway, enjoy this episode. See you on the other side. Hi, Mark, and welcome to the Transection podcast.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so
We're
much.
delighted to have you. Thank you. So, Mark, thanks for sending me the reading material. There's one thing that jumped out, and I thought I'm going to ask him that first. You gave me so much dirt on you. We've got loads. No, I'm joking.
Where we go. Yeah.
So my very first thing is, and I didn't know this about you, that you've been on Oprah.
Yes.
Tell me all about that.
I don't know if there's as much to tell as one would think. You know, at the time, I was the managing editor for the magazine Anything That Moves, which was at the time, well-known, the only international magazine on bisexuality, and it was published by the Bay Area Bisexual Network, and her producers had reached out to us looking for guests, and they ended up inviting myself and my partner, my wife Holly, and it was not fun. This was in the 90s. And I don't remember the name of the psychologist that they had, but it was kind of, we were invited on and then dumped on us in terms of like, oh, so and asking all these questions that didn't make any sense. Like, oh, so you're free to, it was the whole polyamory, angle. And it was like, had you done no research? Had you not asked any so I was in the strange position of being on this extremely popular show and needing to kind of contradict Oprah's questions. Anyway, anyway, and I was not as articulate as I could have been either. So it was kind of this surreal experience. We ended up, on the show and basically got very little publicity out of it. The magazine saw zero bump in subscribers. It kind of came out of it and goes, well, I hope that did some good for somebody.
Yeah.
So it's not the normal thing that people tend to think of when they think, oh, you were on Oprah. It was not.
Wow. So it sounds like the psychologist or whoever was on had a bit of a negative agenda.
Totally negative agenda. And I wish my memory was better at this point.
Yeah.
I don't even have a recording of the show. Like, I can't even find a recording of the show. And because it was pre-internet, you can't find it. So who knows? Maybe I'm making this all up. Maybe it was it was just a bad dream. But it was, yeah, they like, I feel bad for your podcast right now because I just cannot remember the details of the show enough. But I do remember that he was asking questions that were totally off base about bisexuality. And it was really, you could see me looking off to the side as my memory streams back over the years. And yeah, I just remember that it was a really unpleasant, uneven experience, and that I wish I had been better prepped for more kind of hostile questioning rather than.
Yeah, that's not what you expect at all.
I wasn't really expecting it, and I should have, and I had a friend who worked as the main media rep for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force at the time. And I remember talking to him before the show and just trying to get oriented on, like, okay, so how do I prep for this? And yeah, and I just, and I was also in my 20s, which doesn't mean anything. There's lots of really smart, prepped people in their 20s, but I was just so young. Looking back on it, I realized I could have made a better chance of it. And as I'm thinking about it, it just speaks to, like, anybody who's going to be involved in activism, who's going to be involved in media, like, there is, like, you really media literacy and the ability to handle questions and messaging is so important. It's even more important now, right? And it's like when I listen to you and watch you, and listen to your podcast, like I feel like there's like the next generations. It's so weird to even speak like this. Am I really in my 50s? Anyway, but
no,
it's
not.
like it just feels so much more prepped. And so, like there's because of the internet and because of the proliferation of so much alternative media and access to being interviewed, I feel like there's many more people who are way more articulate and prepped than I was at the time, despite running a magazine and despite being involved in national level queer activism. Yeah. Anyway, that's the whole topic, right? But
I definitely, I know that for me, I've been running my own page, Genders Together, on Facebook for about 6 years now, and it's definitely a baptism of fire. I think I was so naive and very ignorant when I started. I just started with an interest, and I've seen in those 6 years, I've seen lots of pages come and go of activists who couldn't hack it, or they had to look after their mental health. And earlier this year I had a few months off, because I just needed that space. I needed to detach and then come back to it in a healthier way.
I can only
And
imagine. You must. I mean, I can't. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, I know very well like the crap that you probably receive on a daily basis. So,
to be fair, actually, I don't know why, but I'm amazingly lucky with my page. We do occasionally get people who come along just to be nasty or invalidating, and they're just, you know, it's like a hobby or something for them, just to go around and upset other people and fling proverbial poo at other people. But I mean, sometimes we get people and they do seem like trolls, but actually there's a lot of emotion underneath for them. There's something going on there, and there's something very personal that obviously us just existing and speaking has touched a nerve.
right.
So sometimes, and I actually posted about this yesterday or this morning. No,
Yeah, I
it's this
saw
morning.
that post of yours about like the way you responded and how they came back. I've seen that dynamic.
Yeah, and do you know what? There's Rain Dove, the non-binary activist. I don't know if you've heard about them, but they often
Mm.
have shared things where they've talked to people who've started off their interaction or conversation really horrifically, and Rain is like, "Oh wow, you seem to be having a really bad day," and it's the sort of, you know, Rain seems to get some trolls that are so just incredibly aggressive and very like violent with their words, and Rain seems to be able to turn these things around in the most incredible ways. And I was like, I always aspire to be able to get positive results out of an interaction that starts off so horribly. But so most of the time, people say things to me, and I think, oh, just fuck off and die. And I think that's a very human thing and everything. But this was the first time. So for those of you who hadn't seen it, my page Genders Together just over a month ago got raided, and somebody within the group that organised this raid of sort of hatred and tyranny had messaged me, taken screenshots and messaged me and said, by the way, this is about to happen, or if this has happened already, these are the people involved. So I messaged the instigator and just basically said, like, and looked at his profile, and I said, listen, you know, you say you're a Christian, but these actions are not actions of love. And, you know, to assume that I also don't share these values is false. And to assume that I also don't know your prophet is, you know, is a big assumption. Assuming makes an ass out of you and me. Um, and yeah, so that was over a month ago, and this morning I got a message from him via my website to say, I'm sorry for what I did. I don't agree with your worldviews, but I had no right to do what I did, and you deserve to have your own space, and I hope you can forgive me, and I'm sorry, God bless. And I was like, oh, wow, it's happened the first time.
It's just so amazing because I've had that happen a lot over the years in private spaces, right? It's like you can't do that in public because people, you know, they get in a defensive mode, and it's really hard. And I think, to be fair, it's really hard to shift deeply driven worldviews and opinions in public. You know, that takes such like to be able to admit to making a mistake that challenges your worldview in public is it's such an extraordinary act
Yeah.
of grace and healing, that to be able to do that in private is really, I think, very compassionate. And I've definitely seen that happen. I've been, you know, over the years posting on and this is, you know, this is the miracle of social media. I just want to say that the miracle of social media is being able to share space with people and being able to listen in on conversations or be involved with conversations without actually intruding on space and without necessarily being in physical danger or putting other people in physical danger. Like, for me to be able to witness conversations between Black folks without me having to actually be in the room and altering the dynamic in that way, or for you know, for me to be able to witness women, you know, or it's, like talking about sexism or patriarchy and being able to witness these things and being able to learn is such a deep blessing. It's a deep, deep blessing and healing. And so I've been able to, as I've learned and grown over the years, be able to make, these kinds of posts on, anti-white supremacy, trying to take down white supremacy and trying to respond to racism, and then have white women mostly respond to me privately going, I don't understand, can I, and then being able to be part of a healing and a shift privately because of that. And I think this, what am I wanting to say here? Allah. Yeah, Allah. So I guess I'm just like, I was so honored when you invited me onto this podcast, because at the time when I was involved in, much more directly involved in queer activism and as part of a bisexual organization, being close, friends and allies with trans folks at the time. And we felt like it was not only society, but we were struggling against mainstream gay and lesbian organizations that were just like unable, like they were so embattled themselves that they were unable to embrace non-binary ways of approaching sexual or gender expression and identity. And I'm just like, my heart is so open seeing, I'm like gonna be in tears, just there's been so much when I think about, and I know obviously so many people are still in danger. I mean, obviously we're not in utopia or anywhere near it, but like the changes I've seen since I came out as bi in 1988 is just, I'm just in awe of what has shifted in so many spaces. So
yeah.
That was a little journey I just took on, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know how coherent it was, but there was this rush of emotion. So
yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. That's lovely. It's funny because sometimes when we've talked, you've talked about not being involved in activism anymore, but then obviously so much of what I see and so many of the conversations that you're having tell me that that's not really the case. So what do you think? How is it different now? Because I mean, you've said before that your activism before, you weren't well paid, and that a lot of that was whilst you were an ambulance paramedic, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and you were saying that you weren't really getting paid, and you were kind of struggling, but you were so dedicated in such a, you were spending so much of your time. So how has activism changed for you? Because you've clearly not, once an activist, always an activist, surely.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on how you use the term. Like I may be using it a little bit old school or whatever, but it's like when I considered myself to be much more of an activist. I mean, it started out with like doing abortion clinic defense against Operation Rescue, like being in the street and like, escorting and protecting, and then running a nonprofit magazine and like being, just being in the street and being like engaged with it a lot. Now I find myself, I certainly speak out on issues. I mean, I'm, doing a lot of writing, mainly in social media spaces around it. But my everyday life, I'm married, I have kids, I'm running a business, and I tend to think of myself more as an advocate and and a writer, and I'm just now trying to figure out, like, we're in this new, like, as of a year ago, we've moved to this new city, and I'm like, how do I connect to local community in ways that are useful? And I was down, we had the Black Lives Matter protests, like everywhere else. I mean, Harrisburg is the capital of the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. And so I live about a mile from the state capitol building, and that's where the protests have been, a lot of them. And I was down there with my kids one day, and then I was called back later that day by a friend who was down there saying, we need more white bodies, things are getting a little iffy. And I showed up down there, and I'm like, I showed up in this space where there were a bunch of riot police, our militarized riot police,
Mm.
and a bunch of black activists, and I was one of very few white activists with my backpack with my first aid kit in it, and I'm kind of my bicycle helmet on, and I'm kind of like making my way towards the front, and I'm like, I just had this like flash of like in my heart of like, okay, so what is my role here? Like, I'm this 50-something-year-old white guy who is like, my body doesn't heal the same way it did when I was in my 20s. And like, I'm facing down riot police. Like, is this really where I'm supposed to be right now? Like, I'm not clear where I'm supposed to be right now and how I'm supposed to be serving. And so that's, I guess that's the distinction I'm making about activism, because I think there's been some very, very smart, insightful analysis about, in a movement, there are many different roles. And I think of activist as a specific kind of a role, as opposed to, being engaged with healing, or being engaged with lobbying, or being engaged with, community organizations, or being engaged with food security and planting gardens, which, it's like I think there's so many different roles. And so when I'm using the word activist, I mean that I don't think my primary role is to be organizing and out on the street, although if there's a general strike, I'm there. So I guess that's the distinction I was making, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. So another thing that I read on the information that you sent me was that you were, you talk quite often about being a Sufi Muslim, but
Yeah.
you said that you were expected to become rabbi.
Yes.
So tell me about that journey a little bit.
Oh, is it not obvious? No. So yeah. So how to do that without spending like hours on that itself. So, so the short version is that my wife, Holly, has been chronically ill for years, and part of her healing path is that she came across a healer trained by Sufi healer, spiritual healing, and I got pulled into that myself. And we were quite active in the Jewish community at the time, Jewish Renewal, and the it just struck me to my heart, like the teachings and the transmission. And we have our sheikh who passed a few years ago. It's this little cute Palestinian man who was actually one of the main teachers of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And he's got Sufi students all over the world, and quite a community here in the US. And it's like, I had this really deep message come to me as we were learning about the Sufi healing, because at the time I was also starting to do the work with business that I do now. And one of the Sufi teachers there, one of his teachers under him, an American, was saying that, we can use this healing to work physically and to work spiritually. We can also work with organizations and businesses. And I'm like, you can heal a business? Like, that's so interesting. And I was really drawn to that. And so when I went through the training, one of the spiritual experiences I had was, because I was still bringing my siddur to the mosque in the Sufi community. And I just remember hearing this message in my heart: you're loving the path more than you're loving me, capital M. And it just kind of shook me, where I was like really needing to listen deeply. And so I just surrendered in that moment and realized that I was supposed to really learn. And there's been such a deep integration in my heart over the years, that the Sufi path and Judaism, and all the spiritual paths are basically saying the same thing. They're just different practices and different understandings. And I just, like, there was just such a deep healing in my heart between Islam and Judaism. And so I've been walking this Sufi Muslim path with a deep honoring and still continued, you know, some practice of the Jewish, you know, history that I have. It's yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say there, but that's kind of like the essence
Mm.
of how I ended up kind of so deeply committed to this piece.
That's lovely. Yeah, I love a lot of the things that you share, and I'm very much a believer that all paths lead to God anyway. So I
Amen.
always find it interesting, and Jordan and I spoke on episode 7. Yes, all about our sort of coming from like anti-queer Christian religions of
Mm.
different denominations, and then how sort of healing from that we both realized that we still needed spirituality, and obviously our paths are very different, and we've done that separately, like without knowing each other or anything. And I do find that a lot, that it's where you find value, and it's where you find connection to the spiritual, the divine, or whatever, and it doesn't really matter. And I so often feel that spiritual connectedness with all kinds of different people, and I really feel that if people were really tuned in, whether they were religious or not, that they would so easily see God or see the divine in many other human beings. And you just feel it. It doesn't really matter like what the label is or how somebody got there. I think when you both have that that thing within you, you can see it in another.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
it's the yeah. I mean, there's a yes, yes, and you know, the reality of, in my experience, that there's this oneness that we all come from, and you know, like the different mystical ways of people in their heart touching and living and walking with that reality and emanating that reality, transmitting it's I feel like it's such an important part of the change that's needed. You know, it's like for you, like the example that you gave earlier of responding to that person who did the raid on your page. I mean, that's such a, I mean, for you to stand in strength and yet also extend compassion and clarity, like that's, I mean, that's ministry in my mind. That's a healing process. And there's a teaching that one of my teachers gave us early in the training, was like, how do you say no without closing your heart? Like without hardening your heart. Like how do you say no? And I think that that's one of the deepest teachings that we can embrace. And one of the things I love about Sufism and Islam is that one of the central statements is La ilaha illallah. And La ilaha illallah starts with the word no. It's like, no, there is nothing but oneness. And it starts by saying no to illusion. It starts by saying, it's like this sacred no that enables our whole heart to turn towards the source of love, to let go of all of our attachments to dualism, to separation, to, you know, to the fight. And that's what I saw in that post that you shared. It was like you weren't collapsing, you weren't ceding any ground, you weren't, but you weren't also dehumanizing the other person. Like you were calling this you were just oh my goodness, I don't know why talking to you, I'm like I just being reduced to tears for the second time. But it's it was just so beautiful. It was such a beautiful example of what I aspire to hold on a daily basis, and what I hope that we can all learn to
Thank you.
hold. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps, I'm surprised. Like, I do feel like you have to get out of your own way, and it's not really you. I feel like you channel these things, definitely. It's not, it's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes people are like, that's amazing. I'm like, I just got out of the way. I don't want to take credit for it. I just let it happen. And I heard my ego that was just like, oh, I want to tell that person to go fuck themselves, or like make a horrible mum joke or something. And I'm like, ego, I hear you. It is annoying. I acknowledge it. But we're going to see that if we can get something better out of that situation. And the ego's like, oh yeah, all right, I'll give it a go then. It's going to be pointless. So it's so funny. I think, I think it's important to bring humanity to these moments as well, and like be honest about it, that these things are difficult, and it takes practice and like willingness for it to go wrong. It's so much easier to cut people off and be like, oh, fuck off, you wanker.
Right.
But yeah, I'm amazed, and there's definitely been a shift, I think, for a lot of people around me. I've noticed as well, in that people are starting to communicate differently. I'm seeing a lot more argument and a lot more people getting angry and being very nasty, but then I'm also seeing lots of people who are starting to join in with love a lot more. And I was listening to Eckhart Tolle on um, Russell Brand's podcast recently, and he was talking about the current situation of the world at the moment, bringing out these, people are either going to react with more fear and they're going to become like more entrenched, or they're going to start to question things and come together. And I really like that. So so yeah, I like, Mark, how much you've shared that things are changing, because I often think to myself, I mean, I listen to people like Kahindi Andrews, who says like with the Civil Rights Act and Black Lives Matter and things like that, like slavery became abolished, but then they just kind of moved it into prisons. So they were like, well, slavery's, so it's kind of like there are incremental changes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the people at the receiving end are that much better off, if at all. But then I listen to things that you say and other people who say things have changed a bit. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in like the negative, or thinking like that things won't get better.
Yeah.
But I guess you've been around for longer, so I mean, and the fact that you were moved earlier, thinking about it, I was like, yes, this is real. Things are changing. It's slow. I mean, it's a glacial pace, but it's speeding up, I think. And like you said, because of the internet, we now have like an equal platform where anyone can have a voice.
It's true. And, I think some of the change, I don't know. I don't have any ultimate answer on any of this, but I wonder, and I suspect, if the fact that the US is coming to the end of its empire, at least that's what it feels like to me, late stage capitalism, it's starting to really crumble. The cracks are starting to show. Like, the people that are supposed to have benefited aren't benefiting. And of course, there's a, fascistic response to that, among certain certain populations within our country. And yet there's also, like, the country's just getting, browner and queerer, like there's just, it's like, it's happening, and it's ultimately going to, the demographics just, you can't help but shift. And it's like, it's not going to be too long before white people are in the minority. And like, that's obviously not a panacea, it's like they're, nobody's inherently better because of the color of their skin or what, or not. But I think that just like breaking the back of American capitalism is going to free up a certain amount of creativity in response, and really give us a chance to, I don't know, there's just a chance. There's so much that I felt like four different kind of analyses kind of come in at once there, because there's like the capitalist analysis, and then there's the analysis of scale, which is kind of related to that. Like, I just think that the US, speaking from the perspective of where I'm sitting geographically, is just too large. It's just too large. And I think the same is true for corporations. Like, they're just too large. And when they become too large, and I have friends who are corporate consultants who say it's not the scale, it's like all of these other things. And I'm like, the scale is part of it, because when it's this large, then you can't have direct accountability. Like, here in the city of Harrisburg, I've met two of the city council members. Like, one lives in my neighborhood, and one, it's like another one, her mom goes to the church up the street from me. It's like, and I know her mom, and I've, met her at a breakfast, and it's like, I know, like, there's a possibility for engagement and human level accountability that doesn't happen on a larger scale. And on a larger scale, you can concentrate wealth and power to such an extent that it becomes very hard to topple it and change it. Like, who can knock on the door of the, CEO of Exxon, or of Amazon, to, like, or Mark Zuckerberg? Like, you can't get at his front door to confront him with all the crap that's going on. And but for human scale enterprises, like, you can, if there's a company here that's that's doing wrong, like, we can show up on their front door. We can, there's a level of accountability that's not possible otherwise. And that's part of my hope, is seeing that scale break. I mean, that's a huge part of the work that I do in business with small businesses. It's like, the more that micro-sized businesses can thrive, like, that really helps to start to shift the economy in ways that that aren't possible if all we have is a monocropped landscape of global corporations.
Yeah, agreed. And I see a lot of what you do in helping people and micro-sized businesses as part of that change, because I think about, however many, not even that long ago, 100, 200 years ago, there was often a family business or a family trade. And obviously with like factories and industrial revolution and things like that, that really changed things in a big way, and it's continued to and now individuals are so reliant, and they're so used to being employed. They think that it's secure. They don't realize how much they're getting ripped off, that the amount of money they make is not anywhere near what they get paid. And yeah, and I see so much of that, and so many people saying, oh, well, I might as well be self-employed. Like, what's the difference? I would get paid more for my time. And I think about even my own entrepreneurial adventures, and people say, well, why don't you go and get a job for, like, in the cafe for a bit? And I'm like, it would take me an entire day to earn there what I would earn in 1 hour, being self-employed.
Right. I mean, this is the thing about capitalism. Like, large corporations, the only thing that they're more efficient at is concentrating wealth. It really, and like even mentioning the Industrial Revolution, like, the only reason the Industrial Revolution could happen is because of slavery in the US. There was a direct connection, because suddenly all of these cotton gins could produce way more cotton and textiles than, I mean, it was like, but it's like, where was the cotton coming from? Like, the only thing that could supply that much cotton was chattel slavery. That was inhuman, genocidal use of, other people's stolen labor. And without that, without like the built-in exploitation of these larger companies, it just, the whole system falls down. The whole system falls down. It's like, large companies are like, there are I admit that there are probably a few technological things that you would need a larger group, like building a jet plane. But then you have to start to question, like, so we have jet planes that are polluting the, you know, it's like what, like if you're forced to operate at a smaller scale, you're forced to come up with much more creative, local based responses to things that are much more nimble. And when you see something going wrong, you don't have $100 billion corporation rushing down this road that says, well, we can't change this because I can't profit as much. Whereas if you have a smaller company and it's like, oh my God, we're destroying these things, and not only is it a terrible thing to do, but we're going to get the backlash, maybe we need to shift. And I just it's all so bound together, like freedom and liberation and capitalism and global corporatism and slavery and exploitation. Like these are all of these things are linked in ways that are really quite conscious. I don't think we even have to talk about conspiracy. I think it's all out in the open, like how exploited labor leads to legislative control, leads to, you know, oppression, leads to, you know, all the links are there. And what we need is all of us bringing our creativity to the places where our hearts and our skills are most alive. Like I'm working in business because that's where I'm most alive, and there's a lot of creativity there, and it needs to happen. But that's not the whole solution. Like the whole idea of having one single solution or one single answer is a white supremacist capitalist answer. Like the answer is
Collective.
biodiversity, right?
Yes.
It's like collaborative. It's like many people.
Yeah, and I get that a lot. It's so important. It's so funny, isn't it? Because I find this a lot when I'm trying to explain like a new concept to somebody, or well, new to them, of like how things work or what frameworks you can use to have more open conversations. And so often people don't seem to understand the concepts that me and many other visionary thinkers and stuff, we're not trying to take the current system and replace it with a different one. We're saying just get rid of it all together. Let things be open, let things be nuanced, and you know, and they're like, well, okay, well, I've been following this person, but if they're not ethical, should I follow a different one? I'm like, don't follow any, don't idolize anybody. And they're like, oh, so this is what this is what you say, so this is the rule. And I was like, no, this is you know, yes,
I can imagine Jesus running into the same issue. No, that's not. I know. No. Also, well, you know.
And they think that, yeah, exactly. We're all individuals. I'm not. But it's this idea, is it, that people don't seem to understand the concept that because you're suggesting something new, you're not suggesting a replacement of the old. You're saying like, I'm not trying to emulate any of this, and there's not one person you should be looking up to. There is not like one ideology or one solution. Like it's a massive collective effort, and that we should be equally listening and valuing everybody's contributions as much as our own, and as much as, you know, to the point that we shouldn't have this one single narrative or this one idea of how we do anything. Every time that we speak about it, we should be aware that we're talking about one method of a million.
Right.
And yeah, and I think I see a lot of what you do with your business and encourage, you know, helping people to thrive on their own without all of that kind of entrapment. And I see that as a big part of the evolution of our society.
Thank you, because that's my intention, and it's so beautiful to have that reflected back. And so I'm really grateful. And yeah, because I get that a lot, you know, not a lot, but it's like, oh, so you want socialism? It's like, no. Do you want communism? I'm like, I don't want a one single monocropped system where the main focus is on economic activity. Like that is not going to work. You know, it's like you know, it's the same with with anything, like in diet. Like I remember having a few years ago having these conversations about like, well, we should be, you know, people saying, people, you know, individuals that I was witnessing saying, well, veganism or vegetarianism. I'm like, have you ever lived in a northern climate? Like where you can't grow things year round? And it's like, you know, there's a certain amount, you know, there are certain regions and certain places, like after living in Ithaca, where the, you know, which isn't even that far north compared to some folks, you know, but living in central New York State, where, you know, the average last frost date is mid-May, and you have a very short growing season. It's like there's a certain amount of animal protein that if you're not depending on things being shipped thousands of kilometers, it's like you're going to be depending on some animal protein, you know. And it's, you know, and so I just, this whole piece of like encouraging people to be, yes, I love being connected globally, but the solutions have to come from local community, because local conditions are so variable. And even if they're similar, isn't it cool that two similar communities could come up with two different answers to the same problem in ways that could enhance both communities if there's communication? It's just, I mean, to me, that's what's so delightful about humanity. There's a Sufi saying. It says we want to recognize the unity and the multiplicity, but we also want to recognize the multiplicity and the unity. Like all of this is divine. The great Sheikh Al-Akbar said, Ibn al-Arabi said that each thing that exists only exists because the divine lends its presence to that thing. And to be able to see the holiness and the sacredness in each little individual part of creation, and how we combine and how we grow in such stunningly unique ways depending on the soil that we're in, is to me part of the miracle and the inspiration in life.
Yeah, that's lovely. I like that. So with, what do you think is very different about how you do business coaching or business support that you don't see in other coaching circles? Or
Yeah, I'm really grateful that over the last 20 years, there's been a lot more spirituality that's come into, you know, awareness of spirituality in business. My colleague Martin Root, who kind of coined the term spirituality in the workplace, is, you know, we've just seen tremendous amount over the last 20, 30 years. But it's like a return. And so I kind of resist saying like, what do I do differently? Because there's so, like, everybody does things differently. One of the things that I take particular delight in is, I was a paramedic. I'm very practical. Like I like to see our clients make money and get clients. I like to see the businesses work. I like the details and getting it. And what is so stunning to me is when we can find love present in the details of business. The kind of approach that I don't tend to enjoy as much is, is the kind of gas tank approach to spirituality and business, where you fill up in spirituality and then you go do business in the old way, and then you get drained and then you go fill up again. Like, I want to find the love in the marketing. I've been really, really moved because some of our clients recently have been saying, oh yeah, I've been in the sales conversation, there is love and connection, and creating the marketing message, I can feel the love present. And it's, and like, I want to, that's what moved me to start Heart of Business in the first place, is when I'd had all this marketing and business learning that I'd been doing, and I grew up in small business, and then I was studying these esoteric Sufi teachings, and I was like, hold it, I'm seeing that teaching present in this business practice, and we can emphasize it and bring it out a bit more and make it really explicit, not necessarily explicit meaning, like explicitly Islamic Sufi way of, like, you must chant Arabic and, but to notice that, oh, like, for instance, if I'm naming a problem, like they tell you to do in marketing, I'm naming it from a place of witnessing the perfection and the beauty in someone, and also deep empathy for the challenges, and not needing to kind of frame, like not re-traumatizing people with it. It's like, we need empathy, we need to be seen, we need love and care. And when that love and care comes in, like, people have breathing room, and then they have access to their own discernment, and then I can trust them as an equal human being to discern whether what I'm offering is what they need, or if they need something else. But that's what I love about the work that I'm doing, and what I see people digging into with the Heart of Business curriculum and teachings. It's like, yeah, okay, so there's this weird thing about systems, or this, we're writing a promotional page. How do you find the love in that, rather than trying to bring love to it? Like, there's an inherent love and sacredness in everything, and if we can find it, then we don't have to be, carrying water to an oasis. We can make the business an oasis.
I love that analogy. That's amazing. Thank you, Mark. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you or find you, where can they look for you?
Start with our website, heartofbusiness.com. And, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on elsewhere, and I'm happy to connect with people there as well. But I really encourage every business to, like, have a direct connection off of those platforms as well, because you never know when I'm saying something or you're saying something, and then you get banned, and then you no longer have access. And so if you can have a direct connection. So yeah, come to our website, heartofbusiness.com, and, and see if you resonate, and take a look around. And
oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining me. It was a lovely interview, I thought. I loved interviewing you.
Oh, yay. I just love being in space with you. I wish I could give you a hug right now, and consensually, assuming you want to.
Yes.
But that's the urge, is to
Yeah.
reach around.
Here, take that.
I'm gonna hug you whether you want it or not.
Brace yourself.
But I'm grateful that you invited me into this space, and I'm just grateful for your presence in the world and the love that you're bringing. So bless
thank you,
and
Mark.
bless all that you do.
Thank you. You're going to make me cry now.
Oh, good.
It's my turn.
Not fair, just me.
Oh, Mark, lovely. Thank you so much.
All right. Blessings and blessings. Peace.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Transection podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed listening to Mark and I having a chit chat. I thought it was lovely. I enjoyed it, but I hope I'm not the only one. So thank you very much. Next week, or no, I can't remember if it's next week or the week after, but I've just interviewed Ashwini Prasad, who is the inclusive screenwriter. And it was really magic talking to her, so informative, really lovely. We had lots and lots to talk about. And yeah, always magic when I'm talking to Ashwini. So we've got that coming up as well. And I want to put a call out, and I've called out for this on social media. We are looking to feature some fan fiction. Now, the two criteria is, first of all, that it has to be funny, and we're allowed to laugh at it, because obviously we don't want to laugh at anybody's like serious work. Yeah, so satirical or something like that, or a bit of a piss take, like just something funny. And the second thing is that it has to be in some way queer, like, however, that's cool. Just that we're allowed to laugh at it, and that, you know, it can be smutty if you want it to be. That's fine. I'm quite a fan of My Dad Wrote a Porno, if you've heard that podcast, and also I've listened to a few episodes now of Potterotica, which is where they read fan fiction of erotic Harry Potter. Obviously, it was a while ago since I've listened to that, and we've all got a lot of feelings and opinions about that the Potterverse since all of that stuff. So maybe we'll still steer clear of anything like that, because it's meant to be fun, you know, and kind of guilt-free. Don't get a lot of guilt-free things now, so that's the idea. So if you could please email us, transectionpodcast@outlook.com. You can send or just message us with like a link to your Google Drive or whatever, you know, on social media or whatever. You can just let us know and send your submissions in. We'll promote your work, and Jordan and I are planning to read it out, and it's just meant to be a laugh. We're looking for comedy, really, or at least something that's like so bad that it's good. Send in your nominations, or it can be your own work too. That's okay. If you're not going to promote yourself, then who is? So yeah, send that in to us. We've got lots of good things coming up, and go and have a look at our shop. We've got lots of things in there. Surely you've got someone to buy a gift for, or I don't know, maybe you fancy something for yourself. Yeah, all the stuff we sell is all good fun, all upbeat and positive things. Oh, and we also have the design, the non-bino dino design, which I brought out a couple of weeks ago, and I love it. Every time I go to promote it online, I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. I'm going to order some bits on payday for myself, so then I can wear them on the podcast and fashion them for you, darling. So yes, anyway, thank you very much. Remember, come and find us on social media or sign up to our mailing list, mooksharrishill.com/transection. There's a green box. You just put your name and your email address in there, and Bob's your uncle. It's done. It's easy. No more than 2 emails per week. That's the rule. I don't want to spam anybody, like, can't be bothered. Don't want to put anyone off. Oh, and also I am putting together a course. Some of you don't know this, but I'm an NLP practitioner as well, and I help people, just coach them and talk to them and educate them and help them process their stuff. So not like a counsellor or a therapist, a bit more practical than that. But basically, I have started working again with all my sort of trans coaching and educating and things, and I've started to work with parents of trans plus kids so that they can become better allies, better informed, and have a place to kind of express themselves and work through their own feelings without obviously making it their kids' problem, because that's obviously what we don't want at all. So if you're interested in anything like that, you need that kind of support, or you know somebody who is looking for that sort of support, that acknowledgement, education and all that sort of thing, and a place to work through their learning and kind of letting go of old feelings and things like that, just put them my way. Just be like, my mate Harris on the podcast is doing this sort of work, and you need help, so here you go, have that. You'll probably do a better job of selling it than I just did. Anyway, take care. We'll see you in the next episode, and until then, build bridges and have fun. Bye.